If you don't know this man, if you don't know this man, if you don't know this man,
Breaking news here at 5. We have learned this afternoon that the comedian Norm Macdonald has died. And Macdonald died today after a 9-year battle with cancer.
The reason I don't like it is because in the old days they go, hey, that old man died. Now they go, hey, he lost his battle. That's no way to end your life, you know. He was waging a brave battle, but at the end, I guess he got kind of cowardly was what happened. And then the bowel cancer, it got brave. You got to give it to the bowel cancer.
Dirty work. Bob Saget's directional debut. What? I can't even use the ramen beat song? Oh, for God's sake. Let's try this again. Dirty work. Bob Saget's directional debut, starring Norm Macdonald and Artie Lang. My first ever video. Around this time in my life, I had actually never made a YouTube video before. You can tell. In ways though, I am proud of how this video turned out because I have a lot to say about this film and I still have a lot more to say about it. I am trying to say this now without any sense of irony whatsoever. I do still think that this film is a subversive masterpiece and it is one of my favorite comedies of all time. But on the other hand though, I did not know how to use a microphone, did I? When Don returned to NBC as president in 1993, NBC returned to... Yeah, I know it's common sense, guys, but if you are going to use a microphone, learn how to use the settings, unlike me, who accidentally selected it to podcast mode, hence why I sound like I'm in a cave. Although I am living in a cave right now. It's almost been 2 years since I made that video on Dirty Work, and there's actually a few points that I want to reflect on, and there's a few other things I would like to discuss that I didn't talk about in my first video. I think the best place to start off this video is by discussing Norm Macdonald's return to SNL. I didn't talk about this previously, mainly because it is kind of common knowledge, but I might as well bring it up anyway because it is one of Norm Macdonald's shining moments as a comic. So as we all know, Norm could have kept his job with SNL, but he was told that he couldn't do Weekend Update anymore and that Jim Downey was going to be fired. Norm basically refused this offer in support of Jim Downey and he was let go from SNL. But as it's also well known, Norm was basically told that, well, he just wasn't funny and that's why they were going to let him go. Norm knew this was bullshit, and let's be honest, Don Olheymer also knew this was bullshit as well. 1 year after Dirty Work had finally been released in cinema, Norm Macdonald was very surprised to learn that he was invited to return to SNL to host the October 23rd, 1999 show. Norm had several questions about this. I mean, after all, if he was fired from SNL for being unfunny, why was he now asked to return to host the show? So, Norm returns to SNL to host the show, and he had a lot to say.
You know, when the people here asked me to do the show, you know, I gotta say, I felt kind of weird, you know. I don't know if you remember this, but I used to actually be on this show, you know. I used to do the Weekend Update news routine, you remember that? That was me, right? So then, a year and a half ago, right, I had a sort of a disagreement with the management at the NBC. I wanted to keep my job, right? They felt the exact opposite. So you see, they fired me because they said that I wasn't funny. But now, this is the weird part, right? It's only a year and a half later, and now they asked me to host the show. I go, how did I go in a year and a half from being not funny enough to be even allowed in the building to being so funny that I'm now hosting the show? Then it occurred to me, I haven't gotten funnier. The show has gotten really bad. So yeah, I'm funny compared to, you know, well, you'll see later. But...
And yes, in typical Norm fashion, this was a mixed response. He got some laughs, some cheers, and some boos. Never change. Norm Macdonald had every right to act like this. After all, if it wasn't for Olheymer's involvement, this wouldn't have happened. And now, let's go back to Don Olheymer. This fucking guy again? Jesus Christ. When first making my video on Dirty Work, I tried to be as fair and civil as I could to Don Olheymer, and in all fairness, I don't necessarily regret that. At the end of the day, as I said previously, even though Don was a complete asshole to Norm Macdonald for no reason at all, I still don't think it's fair to judge him just based on that as a human being. To this day, I do not believe that the OJ jokes were the reason why Don Olheymer did not like Norm Macdonald. I personally believe that the main reason why Don didn't like Norm in the first place is because when Don Olheymer was brought in to try and improve the television ratings, he basically wanted to prove that he was the boss and that nobody was safe, no matter how popular they were. As far as I'm considered, again, he clearly didn't think Norm was that smart and thought he could push him around, but this completely backfired in his face to the point that, well, this is Don Olheymer's legacy now. It's not the fact that he gave Conan O'Brien a chance, it's just the idea that he tried to push Norm, and now everyone thinks he's a moron for it. So you might be wondering then, why am I talking about this weird big-headed man that strangely looks like the purple guy from that game that everybody likes? I was watching a clip from an interview between David Letterman and Norm Macdonald. David Letterman said this.
Don Olheymer right here. This is the guy who runs NBC. Don Olheymer right there. Hi, girls, would you mind coming up to the suite to audition?
Now, this is a pretty innocent quote at first, until you realize that Don Olheymer was accused of sexual misconduct by an employee. This person was none other than Jamie Tarras, the president of ABC Entertainment from 1996 to 1999. She was the first ever woman to hold that position. There are two articles you can read online regarding the allegations against Don Olheymer. These articles are from the New York Times and Deseret News. I'm going to quote the Deseret News article because it says something that was quite damning that wasn't even mentioned in the New York Times article. Rumors swirled that Jamie had obtained a release from her contract at the Peacock network by threatening to charge the then NBC West Coast president Don Olheymer with sexual harassment. Brackets, it was not the only unconfirmed report of that type that involved Olheymer, close bracket. The situation got so nasty that at one point Olheymer referred to then Disney president Michael Ortiz as the Antichrist. It doesn't help matters that once again the article mentions that this was not the only unconfirmed report of that type that involved Olheymer. Now, look, I get it. It's easy to just assume that Don Olheymer is guilty because it's Don Olheymer, but to disappoint everyone, I'm going to be like Sweden here and be completely neutral.
Oh, brother, this guy is great!
It is a very strange situation where you don't know who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth, because there's another article from the New York Times saying how Jamie alleged that she was sexually harassed by Don Olheymer, but in brackets says that neither Olheymer nor Jamie will discuss the allegations for the record. To clarify, the main reason Don Olheymer referred to Michael Ortiz as the Antichrist is because he believes that he started said rumor about the sexual misconduct. So, with that context, we'll never know if Don Olheymer was guilty or not guilty of this. Warren Litterfield was completely right about Don Olheymer. Olheymer clearly had issues with Letterman, Jay Leno, and Conan, but couldn't do anything about it. So basically, all because he couldn't punish Letterman for making a joke about his allegations, he decided to take it out on Norm Macdonald. So ultimately, Don Olheymer looks even more pathetic when you consider that part. It should also be noted as well that when Don Olheymer was on the Rich Eisen show and he was asked about Norm Macdonald, even though Don Olheymer was quite light-hearted about the whole situation, and he even joked that it was the worst decision of his entire career, he still doesn't explain why he tried to censor Dirty Work. I know it's very cliche to say, but the more I read about Don Olheymer, the less I like him. As far as I'm aware, by the way, Don Olheymer didn't remain friends with OJ, by the way, just saying. And then we go back to O.J. Simpson, the main catalyst, the main reason why Dirty Work has such a troubled production history. O.J. murdered Nicole Brown and murdered Ron Goldman, and now he's dead. No, just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding, but Norm Macdonald used to be asked a lot about OJ and his jokes and the impact it had on his career, and Norm Macdonald changed his opinion. He genuinely believed that OJ was innocent. No, really, he meant it. No, really, it's not just a joke. It's not like the point of this video is that Norm Macdonald... Norm jump scare, you know? But no, trust me, guys. Norm really believed OJ was innocent. He really believed it. Moving on. Another strange twist. The R-rated cut of Dirty Work is another piece of lost media that we may never see. Haha, that's where you're on, kiddo. It turns out that the dirtier cut of Dirty Work has finally been found, and we can all thank Vinegar Syndrome for this. Now, unfortunately, I haven't been able to see this new version of Dirty Work, the main reason being it's a Region A Blu-ray player, and I don't know if you know this or not, guys, but I'm Welsh. I do actually have a multi-region Blu-ray player knocking around somewhere back in my house. I just need to find the remote for it and find the code for it. If I'm able to get it working again, I'll definitely try and see this version of the film. Who knows, maybe there'll be a third part of this stupid series. In my first video about Dirty Work, I had theorized that the romance between Norm Macdonald's character and Trailer Howard's character was essentially a piss take of not just romance tropes in 90s comedy movies, and was also put in to make fun of comedians and actors who put themselves into roles so they can basically make out with very beautiful actresses. Case in point, Chris Kattan. And after 2 odd years, that's still just a theory. I don't really know, actually, if I'm being honest with you. Could just be bullshit. I haven't seen the uncut version after all. But there was something I discovered about Norm after making that video. Ironically enough, Norm Macdonald, even though he made fun of Chris Kattan for putting himself into roles where he got to kiss Pamela Anderson, Norm Macdonald has actually done this himself. In a sketch where Tommy Lee, Pamela Anderson's boyfriend at the time, actually stars as himself, there's actually a sketch of Norm Macdonald dressed up as Tommy Lee, and he makes up with Pamela Anderson. This results in Tommy Lee beating up Norm. Now, if Norm Macdonald really did think it was a bit weird for Chris Kattan putting himself into roles to make out with Pamela Anderson, maybe this does make Norm Macdonald a hypocrite. But I don't think he minds that.
As my buddy says, the worst part about Cosby was he was a hypocrite. And I said, I don't think that was the worst part.
Bob Saget, the director of Dirty Work, actually stated multiple times that he actually wrote a script for the sequel for Dirty Work. It was almost going to happen, but then, well, Norm died. Selfish prick.
But I can't believe he's gone either. I talk about him in present day.
Well, you wrote a sequel for Dirty Work.
I did.
And we had the money?
Yeah, we were going.
That's unbelievable to me.
Yeah. And Norm, I didn't think he was going to die. And I didn't know.
I was going to say, did you know? I mean, you know, writing a sequel that stars a guy who's got leukemia is not a smart move. So
well, nobody knew, and he wanted it that way, and I think it was also him being a gambler at heart, you know, with life.
He thought he could get through it.
And by the way, he was told he was going to. So I think it's those last few weeks. I think he was really thinking he was going to beat it, and we were set to go.
Now, I always heard rumblings that they wanted to make a sequel to Dirty Work, and if I'm being honest, I wasn't really too heartbroken that it never happened. The main reason I think this is just because I feel like that Dirty Work was more like lightning in a bottle. I love film to have a very troubled production history after all. I mean, yes, it was a pain in the ass for Norm Macdonald and Bob Saget at the time, but his bizarre feud with Don Olheymer, it morbidly makes the film even more interesting, and the fact that, again, the extended version of this film was almost lost media at some point is such a weird tidbit of information. And look, when you talk about legacy sequels or sequels to famous comedy movies, they don't usually land, let's be honest. I mean, I haven't seen the new Happy Gilmore, but I've heard the movie is just full of cameos, really. I really can't help but feel that Dirty Work 2 would have just been cameos from the first movie, and this is no offense to Bob Saget, because again, he did a good job directing, but as I'll go on to say though, Fred Wolf and Frank Stal were two of the writers for Dirty Work, and honestly, those guys don't get enough credit when people talk about how funny Dirty Work is. If the sequel didn't have those two guys, then I just don't think the film would have been that good anyway. Look, this is a very hard subject to talk about, if I'm being honest with you. I didn't mention this in my first video about Dirty Work, but there is someone else that we need to speak about. Someone that Norm mentions in his book. Someone that nearly destroyed the production of Dirty Work. And his name is Adam Eget.
Gay people are just like me and you.
I know. Well, you tell me that all day. How I'm just like all the gay people.
Gay people are the same as everybody.
No, you mean you always tell me specifically how you're just I think you're just calling me gay. It's one of the.
It's not an insult. He
no,
thinks it's an insult.
No, I didn't mean it.
Why would being gay be an insult?
Yeah, I love gay people.
Yeah, I know.
When filming Dirty Work, Norm in his book explains that while it was a blast shooting the film, there was something very disturbing that transpired on the making of Dirty Work. Norm explains that he brought Adam Eget to assist him with the film, although he's quite adamant in saying that Eget did nothing to help. After a long day of shooting, Norm Macdonald asked Adam Eget to get a copy of the local newspaper, the Toronto Star. Norm had noticed that the newspaper had a front page torn off, and he asked Adam Eget what's going on. Adam Eget tried lying about this, and Norm kept pressing it. Eget revealed that a young man's body was found in a ravine last night. He was a teenage runaway, just like the rest. I thought you might suspect me. Norm then asked, "Did you do it, Eget?" And Eget said, "No, of course not, boss." Norm explains that the very next morning, by the time he made it to Adam Eget, he was already cuffed and being led away. Hold on, there must be some mistake. The police officers arresting Adam Eget said, "We're just going to the station and having a little talk, that's all." Norm then explains that 20 minutes later, he got a phone call. Adam Eget had made a full confession to the murder of 14 teenagers. The filming of Dirty Work was in Toronto, and the media had immediately labelled this as the Dirty Work murders. But unfortunately, it gets even worse. Adam Eget then admitted to 60 more crimes in the Toronto area. This nearly put an end to the filming of Dirty Work. However, according to Norm, Jack Warden, who plays his father in Dirty Work, went up to him and said, "Did you read the paper today?" Norm asked, "Why?" And then Jack said, "I'll tell you why, kid. A runaway teenager was found dead this morning in the ravine." Norm then says, "No way, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard, you know?" This whole incident had cleared Adam Eget, and Adam Eget walked free. The very next day, Adam Eget was released from prison, and the press stopped using the term the Dirty Work murders, and instead called them the Very Bad Guy murders. But still, it paints a very, very bad picture of Adam Eget. Who knows what happened that day? And maybe Eget wasn't as innocent as we thought he was. This is the real reason why Don Olheymer wanted to bury Dirty Work, and this is the real reason why Dirty Work was almost never released. Or so the Germans would have you believe.
That didn't happen, did it? No, that didn't happen at all. You see, this is just one of the many fake stories that Norm Macdonald tells in his book, Norm Macdonald Based Off a True Story. Because it's not based off a true story. Adam Eget was actually the helpless sidekick who was always with Norm Macdonald on Norm Macdonald's talk show. And in all fairness to Adam Eget, his delivery and his portrayal of a straight man versus Norm Macdonald's crazy personality was comedy gold. And yes, by the way, I did mean to say helpless. But we can also mean helpless as well.
The old man's been in a coma for about 2 weeks now. It looks like we're finally gonna have to just pull the plug, you know? He's my old man. It's tough, you know? It's really tough.
You got any fours?
Not only would I highly recommend you check out Norm Macdonald's book, but there's even an audiobook of this which is recorded by none other than Norm Macdonald himself. There's actually a few clips of this uploaded onto YouTube by a great YouTube channel called I Didn't Even Know He Was Sick. Wait a minute, I get it. Because Norm Macdonald used to make jokes about I didn't know that guy was sick, but in reality, Norm Macdonald was sick himself and no one knew about it. And he's dead now. Irony.
Let me tell you how much of a piss take this book is. Norm tells us a real story that happened. Apparently, he went to jail for 4 months because he tried to have Sarah Silverman's boyfriend murdered because he was in love with Sarah Silverman. Norm then goes on to explain that he definitely went to jail for 4 months, where he met a and said taught Norm Macdonald how to be a and then he was released. Norm is truly one of those people that just can't take anything seriously.
I don't get it.
A reason I actually bought Norm Macdonald's book is because while I knew it wasn't a real autobiography, I was kind of hoping there would be a little bit of truth sprinkled into this, and maybe there were some stories about Dirty Work. And I'm kind of right. No, not the Dirty Work murder part that obviously isn't real. For example, when Norm was talking about how he was writing Dirty Work with Frank Sebastiano and Fred Wolf, they decided that before writing the film, they were going to pick their dream cast first and then write the characters based on them. They got Don Rickles, Chevy Chase, Jack Warden, Adam Sandler, and Chris Farley. But they were having issues trying to find Norm Macdonald's sidekick for the movie. Norm explains that one night, 3 days before they were supposed to fly to Toronto, he happened to turn the TV on, and for the first time ever, he saw an episode of Mad TV. An actor named Artie Lan was talking straight to the camera, not in character, and he was hilarious.
I play a scumbag on TV, and I'm a scumbag in real life. I'd like to take this opportunity to talk to some of you kids out there and tell you exactly why I do drugs. I do drugs because, like many of you children, I hate myself.
And most importantly though, what impressed Norm the most was that he wasn't relying on fat man tricks, quote unquote. He had a melancholy about him that reminded him of Belushi. No, by the way, it wasn't the Baywatch segment.
I mean, yeah, I shit the bed.
They shit on the windows! Oh my God!
Norm actually explains then that they actually found out that Artie Lan was a pretty bad drug addict at this point, and that Artie Lan basically had to stay clean the entire time they were filming in Canada. And thankfully, Artie was able to stay sober for the making of Dirty Work. This part of the book was quite interesting to me because I wasn't 100% sure if this was just another lie that Norm told, but at the same time though, there clearly is a lot of truth sprinkled into this because, well, Artie Lan was a pretty bad drug addict at this point. Surprisingly though, Norm was actually telling the truth here. Artie did have to stay sober in Canada. Artie Lan has actually confirmed himself in his book Too Fat to Fish that MGM Studios required Artie Lan to obtain an approval report from his rehab facility in New Jersey. Artie had to settle the matter by paying the center $1,500 as a private donor. Also, speaking of the truth being sprinkled in here once in a while in Norm Macdonald's book, there's something I really admire about how Norm writes himself and portrays other characters in the book. Now, he portrays Adam Eget to be a complete idiot who's completely useless and pathetic, but, well, that's the joke. That was just a dynamic between Adam Eget and Norm Macdonald, which made the two so funny together. However, when Norm talks about other characters in his book, like Sarah Silverman, Artie Lan, Fred Wolf, Frank Sebastiano, Don Rickles, he basically writes himself to be a complete idiot who doesn't understand how comedy works. Rather, it's almost like he writes himself that he was almost lucky to have the career that he did, as he inadvertently praises the other actors in his book. Let me try and explain what I mean by this. Let's go back to Artie Lan. When Norm, Fred, and Frank were looking for his sidekick for dirty work, he explains that Fred and Frank were the experts here. They told him that since Norm was a skinny guy, his buddy should be a fat guy. Norm says, "I got real mad and decided I need to remind him who was boss. That's a bunch of horse shit. What about Laurel and Hardy? They were both skinny and were really funny." Obviously, Norm didn't actually mean this because, well, everybody knows that Laurel and Hardy is the skinny and fat man dynamic. And then Norm purposely goes on to name other examples, quote unquote, of two skinny double acts and fails miserably. Abbott Costello, Mon Parkettle, Burt Reynolds and Tom DeLuise. Again, Norm obviously doesn't mean this, but he's writing himself to be the idiot who doesn't know how comedy works, and rather, he's actually praising Frank Sebastiano and Fred Wolf, the other writers for Dirty Work. I'll give you one more example where Norm praises his co-workers on the set of Dirty Work rather than himself. The most well-known scene in Dirty Work, as everybody knows by now, is the prison scene. However, arguably, the second most well-known scene in the film involves fish. Let me give you a bit of context. Norm Macdonald's character, Mitch, and Artie Lan's character, Sam, start their business called Dirty Work, where they do other people's dirty work. There's one scene where this man pays the two characters to get rid of his noisy neighbors. Mitch and Sam's plan is to break into the mansion and put fish everywhere to make the place smell so badly that the neighbors move out. However, what happens instead, though, is that the owner is actually about to start a multi-million drug deal. Due to a complete misunderstanding caused by the smell of the fish, the two gangs in this mansion kill each other brutally off screen. The reason why this scene is so funny is because the film doesn't show the fight between these two gangs. Rather, you hear them brutally kill each other off screen, and all you see is a static shot of Artie Lan and Norm Macdonald's bland facial expressions, implying that they're so disturbed at what they're hearing. While it was Norm's idea to do this static shot, it was actually Fred Wolf's idea to have these characters in the mansion, and with the help of Bob Saget's simple but very effective directing, it's one of the best scenes in the movie. In all fairness to Saget, he wasn't really the best director. I mean, again, what other movies did he direct after Dirty Work that were actually good?
My house is full of shit! He's shit everywhere!
But again, his direction with the static shot and the characters composed make the film so funny. There's a lot you can take out of this book though, but I really admire Norm Macdonald's admiration of his co-workers and how, well, humble he genuinely comes off as. Again guys, Norm acted like an idiot, but he definitely wasn't an idiot. Norm Macdonald knew that Dirty Work would have never been made or would have never been as good if it wasn't for the support of Artie Lan, Bob Saget, Fred Wolf, Frank Sebastiano, Trailer Howard, Don Rickles, and the list goes on. The most common joke you'll probably hear about Artie Lan is that it's absolutely insane that he's alive whereas Norm Macdonald and Bob Saget are dead. And yeah, I'm sure Artie would make jokes about that himself, but honestly though, I think Artie is a great part of Dirty Work anyway. Him and Norm genuinely do have great chemistry, and as of the making of this video, Artie Lan is clean and sober, so honestly, good on him. He has had a pretty tough life in all fairness.
Do you want to talk about the elephant in the room?
Wow. Okay. You know what? You know what? First of all, wow. All right. I can't even. You know what?
Except for the other thing. That didn't happen to Norm in real life. But the other thing... Yeah, okay, we've seen this bit. Can you speed on, please? Thank you. So, when I made this little joke, I thought nothing of it, really. It's just a dumb little joke in tribute to Norm's humor. However, there's a very interesting comment on my video left by a gentleman named Henry Ra, where he says that Norm apparently hints at something like this happening to him in his book. At the time when I made my first video on Dirty Work, I had never read Norm Macdonald's book, but I was aware of the Uncle Jack chapter. Now, I don't want this sounding too bad, but if I'm being brutally honest, I never thought too much about it anyway, and I never gave it much thought, because this is Norm Macdonald we're talking about here. His book is literally written to be a complete piss take anyways, so I thought nothing of it. But hey though, how bad can this chapter be? I mean, it is Norm Macdonald after all. He has a very dark sense of humor. Let's give this chapter a read, shall we?
And I asked old Jack if he figured he could still shoot a squirrel's eye out at 40 feet. I don't know, old Jack said. I love squirrels now. I've even trained one. I feed him corn right from my hand, and he climbs onto my shoulder. Now that's got to be kept a secret, Sprite. Because if another man found that out, I'm afraid that he would kill my squirrel and dry it on the porch till it was ready to eat. Where's the squirrel, old Jack? Well, he lives in the tool shed with me. Falls asleep right on my belly. Will you show him to me, old Jack? I can't do that, Sprite. He might get spooked and bite you. Maybe I'll just teach you a magic trick instead. When I looked over at old Jack, there was a tear in his eye. I'd never seen that before. A tear in a man's eye. He got up and quietly left the house, and I chased after him. Say, Sprite, I know what'll lift your spirits. Well, I know the very thing. How'd you like to see a trained squirrel? I was very excited. But you said you could never show him to me, old Jack. I haven't got the money to get you a true birthday present, Sprite. This'll have to do. So we walked down the lane together, toward the North 40. The beneficent moon hung low and shone bright, leading us to the shed. When we arrived there, I was so excited I couldn't wait. I pushed the door open and rushed inside, looking for that squirrel. But I couldn't find him, to me now, and it was blocking out the light of the moon. I suddenly remembered that I'd read somewhere how the light of the moon was just an illusion, and the moon was only a cold, cold stone. I watched old Jack look from side to side before he turned his gaze on me, and his eyes flashed black like the wing of a crow. He closed the door, and the inside of the shed went black. Then I heard the bolt. I forget what happened next.
The next chapter after this is simply one page. It's a picture of Norm Macdonald when he was much younger. The title says 8 years old to 13 years old, and it simply says, I forget. End chapter.
I wasn't expecting that.
You know, usually I would brush something off like this as just being another Norm joke. Just another joke that he made in bad taste. But there's something different about the way he describes this incident. The way he describes everything so vividly, and again, how he says it in his audiobook. I don't know if he is telling the truth. And that's really concerning. Norm Macdonald did something that I didn't think he was capable of doing. He sent chills down my spine. In an interview with The Dinner Party, Norm had an interesting response to this question.
Well, we wanted to talk about, if we may, probably the darkest moment of the book is you imply pretty strongly that you were sexually abused as a young man at the hand of a seemingly kindly family friend.
Well, I just write what I remember happening, yeah.
Did that give you any pause, first of all, to
Well,
write
I
that to
remember
hear?
nothing. I don't remember being... Someone pointed out to me later that there seemed to be a passage where people would just naturally infer that something bad happened, but nothing bad happened that I know of.
Really? Because it's a frightening moment in the book, and there's a chapter where you do say, "I don't remember anything that happened for the next several years."
I had a lapse of memory for a few years.
Do you have any interest in figuring out what did happen?
No, I would. If something terrible happened, why would you want to remember something awful? Like
you tell me.
You never have a recovered memory that's good. You never go, I used to like blueberry pie. You know what I mean? It's always something horrifically violent or sexual. So I don't need that. I have enough trouble in life. But I don't. Not everything has to be unconquerable. Not everything has to be. You can come back from anything except death.
Do you say that from experience? What gives you the confidence?
Well, I mean, interminable pain is tough, but it's still. I knew a guy like in a wheelchair that could only move his head a little bit. It was a ski accident. Terrible depression for the first year. And then the second year I saw him, I was talking to him, and he was bitching about The Bachelor.
The TV show?
Yeah, the TV show The Bachelor. He was like, why could he pick her? I'm like, what about your thing? So I guess everybody just, regresses to the mean.
This chapter is heartbreaking and it's interesting at the same time. Was Norm actually molested when he was younger, but was he never able to fully admit to it and he just hid behind comedy to hide his own pain? Or is it just a thought-provoking idea about why do people have lapses of memory? Is it literally because they're too young to remember things correctly? Or is it literally just trauma that makes you forget? And if so, have I gone through trauma that I don't remember? Have you gone through trauma that you don't even remember and kept locked up? And if so, if that trauma returns, if you remember something so horrific in your own life that you've tried to hide it away all this time, how the hell are you going to react to said information? Is it going to change you forever? Has it always shaped your life? We will never know. We will never know, Norm.
We stop our Mark Maron-like grilling of him.
I would love to think that this was just a stupid joke that Norm made, but as we've already established, there are bits of truth sprinkled into this book, like how Artie Lan was hired on dirty work in a really, really morbid way. If Norm actually was lying about this, then it kind of proves my point from the first video. Norm Macdonald was a goddamn good actor. I never want to hear that Norm was a shit actor that had no range. This guy proved that he could write and simultaneously combine so many genres together, like comedy, horror, drama, existentialism. Again, I'm probably in the minority of people who think this, but I just didn't like Screwed. The main reason for that is, again, I just didn't think it was very funny, and Norm was seemingly trying to play a straight man, and it simply just didn't work. So that's why it was always bizarre to me that someone as funny as Norm Macdonald could supposedly be bad at acting. Again, any person that can make you laugh can easily go into dramatic acting. See Jim Carrey, see Adam Sandler, see Bill Murray. When I think about how this book completely surprised me and completely took me off guard, I think I'm going to take back my original statement. I think if Dirty Work 2 had actually happened, it would have been pretty damn good. Because the more I think about Dirty Work, the more I think that the film wasn't just good by accident. I still think to this day that the villain from Dirty Work was heavily inspired by Don Olheymer. I still think that the jokes are purposely subversive for a reason, and if we remember, Screwed was not written by Norm Macdonald, so this further proves my point. Norm was not interested in talking about philosophy, which is why people thought that he was just a big idiot. Meanwhile, Norm just casually writes one of the most clever comedies from the 1990s, and literally writes one of the best books that I've ever read in my life. I miss Norm Macdonald so much. It's so weird that he's not around here anymore. Norm Macdonald was usually known as a fearless comedian, and oh boy he was. But there are clips you'll see sometimes of Norm where you realize that he was just like us. He was scared. Really scared.
Don't worry, Norm. He died in his sleep. He didn't feel a thing. And I was like, really? When his heart attacked and killed him, he didn't... Because I wake up like if my cat walks across my belly. You know that? I don't know if my dad was that sound asleep. One guy said he's in a better place. I said he's on the floor. Dead. Earlier he was alive on the bed. Now, with that Tempur-Pedic pillow I bought him for Christmas. I'm no physician, but I think that's the better place over there. On the bed.
What you just saw there was Norm Macdonald making a joke about his father passing away. And if you listen very closely, it sounds like Norm was on the verge of tears, but was able to just barely hold it in. Another notable moment where Norm actually broke down in tears is when he was on David Letterman's show back in 2015. Specifically, this was his final stand-up performance, and Letterman's show had ended that same year. And in typical Norm fashion, David Letterman was really surprised and really taken aback by something that Norm doesn't usually do, and that's break character.
And he has no truck for the sentimental, but if something is true, it is not sentimental, and I say in truth, I love you.
Oh, my God. Very funny, Norm, and thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Norm Macdonald, ladies and gentlemen. That was very sweet, Norm. Good night, everybody.
It is because of things like this, I actually like the very few times you actually do see Norm Macdonald break character and actually laugh. Perfect example is this clip of David Spade.
Mother-daughter porn. Oh, yeah. Because the guy is like a hot 18-year-old, and then you got like an older like cougar, and then the chick's doing it, and the guy's all excited, and then she goes, "Get out, I'll show you how to ride that cock." And he's like, no, and he's trying to look, and he's pulling the other one back by her foot, and she's like, "Can I get my 300 up front?" And then this one's like, "Yeah, you like that shit? Not bad for 57. He's like, 50s? You're a fucking cougar, I thought. Let's talk to the union about putting some parameters on this fucking word cougar. Jesus, you old hag. Get this. He's always darting back to the fake daughter going, she's like, I can't move her. She's too sturdy. She's like, oh, this is how you do it, sissy. It's disgusting. It's true.
What was the website called again?
When you watch some of his last stand-ups, like Hitler's Dog, for example, you thought it was just an old man rambling. You thought it was just Norm Macdonald just being Norm Macdonald. When in reality, he was coming to terms with the fact that he was probably going to die. And no one else knew about it.
That maybe another reason why you wanted to turn your life into this work of fiction is because you're not a fan of confessional comedy, right? I've read that somewhere.
Oh, no, I'm not. No, this is a new thing that I didn't even know about until a couple of years ago, and I started noticing it in clubs, and it was madding. I didn't like it at all.
Why not?
Well, because I was always taught that the nature of art was to conceal, not to reveal. When people confess things, and they're told how brave they are, because they have cancer or something, and they talk about it. Well, everyone has cancer. I mean, it's not rare at all. The brave thing to do if you have cancer is to not talk about it, is to just have it and keep it a secret and don't burden anyone with it. All you're doing is burdening people with those things.
Norm Macdonald clearly lived with a lot of pain in his life. The death of his father, him walking away from SNL, the fact that people just didn't think he was funny, his show being cancelled. And the fact that he could just go on a talk show and clearly act like he was the dumbest person in the room, where he was clearly making fun of people's stupidity, and yet he was surrounded by complete and utter morons. Morons like Bill Murr, who is somehow treated like a philosopher. Yeah, look, I know this isn't exactly a great segue because the video is about dirty work, but when you look at the comedy landscape nowadays, I absolutely despise the so-called Roganverse. It has had irreversible consequences on comedy, and it's ruined it beyond recognition. And sometimes when I think about where comedy is going nowadays, I always think of this Norm quote.
I tell you, man, you got, especially when elections are around, you got to have a lot of, and you're a comedian, they expect you to know things nowadays. You know what I mean? It didn't used to be like that. Like during the Vietnam War, they wouldn't go, wonder what Red Skeleton thinks on this. But nowadays, like I've heard, they go, the comedian is the modern day philosopher, you know? Which, first of all, it always makes me feel sad for the actual modern day philosophers who exist, you know.
It is common knowledge at this point that Norm wasn't really a fan of philosophy in comedy. He didn't even like Bill Hicks or Lenny Bruce, which I adamantly disagree with. I'm not too familiar with Lenny Bruce, but I absolutely love Bill Hicks and George Carlin. In my personal opinion, the reason why George Carlin and Bill Hicks were so effective is because they were actually, you know, smart. One comedian that I think has absolutely disappointed me as of late is easily Dave Chappelle. Wait a minute. Dave Chappelle was good friends with Norm Macdonald. Dave Chappelle and Norm Macdonald worked together on Screwed. See guys, that's the connection right there, guys. Get it? In 2019, Dave Chappelle released one of his more infamous specials, Sticks and Stones, which I actually really enjoyed. Then 2 years later, he releases The Closer. And I didn't really like it. It was my least favorite Dave Chappelle special by far. Dave Chappelle doesn't really make jokes in this special. He just talks and talks and talks and whines and whines and whines. I've seen plenty of people in the past defend Chappelle saying, well, it's just a joke. He's a comedian that can make jokes and he doesn't mean what he says. And usually, 90% of the time, I would agree with this. But again, this whole special, it's not really jokes. He's just complaining. Whereas everybody was really praising Chappelle at this point, I kind of had to bite my tongue a little bit, and I was not even interested in his special after The Closer. By the way, quite interesting that he said that The Closer was going to be his last one, and then releases another one 2 odd years later, but whatever. There are 3 main reasons why I don't like Chappelle's comedy anymore, and here are the reasons. Number 1, Chappelle is now essentially a multi-millionaire who is now in the category of complaining about every single thing that happens to him, complaining about how people may not like his jokes, and complaining about how difficult cancel culture is, when he's a multi-millionaire and is making more money than he's ever seen before in his life.
People want comedy to be dangerous. I want comedy to be dangerous. And if you can't get in trouble, it's not dangerous.
Right.
So complaining about cancel culture is just saying you want to take all of the danger out of it and you want it to be easy for you.
Right.
That I think as soon as I say it, you know, people cheer.
Yeah.
And this journalist was like, why do you think people are cheering?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they believe either you're about to talk about cancel culture? Do you think they like are sick of cancel culture?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, they're way more savvy than that. They've seen the first 40 minutes of the special.
Mm-hmm.
They know I'm not suddenly turning into Ricky Gervais.
Right.
Like they get that I'm about to subvert this in some way.
Yeah.
But I hate people complaining about cancel culture. I hate comics complaining in general. It's the second comedy boom. It's not going anywhere. People are making more money than ever before. And Dave Chappelle, who's won every award in the world, is complaining that cancel culture is making his job harder. It's like, your job shouldn't be easy. Right. If you're gonna make that much fucking money, like, hey, maybe it should be a little hard. You know, I got no issue with that.
Chappelle has now entered that stage in his career where he will make fun of people for acting like victims, but then will immediately act like a victim himself when one person on Twitter didn't like his joke. The second reason I'm really off Dave Chappelle is, well, for the elephant in the room, his attending of the big comedy festival for Saudi Arabia back in 2025, and it only justifies everything I thought about Dave Chappelle, because Chappelle's response to the criticism is absolutely pathetic and laughable. However, the moment where it finally clicked for me, the moment I finally realized what was wrong with Dave Chappelle, was something that Norm Macdonald said. In an interview with Vulture magazine, Norm Macdonald talked about some jokes that had caused some controversy for him in the past. This is where he talks about a scrapped joke that he made about Caitlyn Jenner. I quote, "The other thing was a joke about Caitlyn Jenner, which as a matter of fact was a joke I left out the Netflix special. It wasn't much of a joke really, and it's weird when you have to explain jokes that aren't that funny. The joke was about how everyone was saying Caitlyn Jenner was beautiful, but she's not really beautiful. I went to great lengths to say you should love Caitlyn Jenner and accept her, but you don't have to pretend she's beautiful. There's no reason to do that. That was the entire point of the joke. It was pretty weak, so I won't do those jokes anymore, which is fine, because the reason I didn't do the joke on the special is because I came to an understanding that other people came to much sooner than I did." He was then asked, what was that? Norm Macdonald then said, which is that a lot of people are idiots. You don't want to have a joke be misunderstood and then someone goes and beats up a trans person. Norm was then asked, have you stopped joking about transgender people just because you want to avoid these jokes being misinterpreted, or because you've reached the conclusion that these jokes are offensive? Norm said, I'm worried that someone might get hurt, not offended. I have heard other comedians go, if the joke is funny, I don't care if someone gets beat up. I don't care if the whole world laughs. If someone gets beat up over a joke of mine, what was the point of doing it? Really, it's my own fault if someone had ambiguity or felt any pain on behalf of my jokes. That means I didn't communicate the joke clearly or properly. This, right here folks, is the difference between a good comedian and a bad comedian. Now guys, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've never made a dark joke in bad taste. Of course I have, and anybody watching this video most likely has done this as well. However, sometimes, if you're a comedian and you decide to take a risk with an edgy joke, sometimes you'll make the audience laugh because it's a funny joke. But sometimes though, if you take that risk, people will not boo you, they will not laugh. They'll simply not react, which is the worst thing that can happen in a comedy show. A bad comedian will immediately deflect and say, are you triggered, snowflake? Or it's just a joke. A good comedian realizes that this joke isn't funny, not because it's offensive, but simply because it's just not funny, and once again will be misinterpreted, so then he moves on. That right there is what separates Norm Macdonald from Dave Chappelle. Norm tried to tell a risky joke in a nightclub. It wasn't really funny because, as Norm said himself, he couldn't really explain it properly, so he realized, if I can't understand it, how is the audience going to understand? And he just didn't make that joke again. Dave Chappelle took a risk himself in making repeated jokes about the trans community. And guess what? Chappelle is now outraged by the fact that he feels like that Republicans misused his jokes and weaponized them. The difference between the two comedians, Norm realized he couldn't fully explain himself and he stopped doing it. Dave Chappelle, on the other hand, didn't realize that he wasn't explaining the joke properly, and he didn't realize his own mistake, which ended up biting him on the ass. Therefore, Norm didn't want people to be hurt over his jokes. Meanwhile, Chappelle is disgusted by how right-wingers weaponized his jokes. Do you see what I mean? This is why I was so disappointed by Chappelle, because he should have seen this coming. Norm didn't give a shit about what he joked about, as he had no filter, but even Norm realized there is a line you sometimes do not cross. Norm knew that you have to read the room. You have to realize what people interpret and what they cannot interpret. What is that line? Well, you have to figure it out. And you shouldn't complain when you don't realize where the line is. Now, I should make this abundantly clear right now. I would consider myself to be very left-wing in real life, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Norm Macdonald was left-wing either. In fact, while it isn't really known what Norm was politically, if you had to guess, he most likely was a Christian conservative, especially with all the negative comments he makes about the Clintons. Although they do deserve that, mind you.
Murderers. Yeah.
Oh, Clinton, he murdered a guy.
Yeah, you know, we're not allowed to, you're not allowed to put out as the next
I thought it was a matter of record.
And let's be really honest here. Norm was absolutely not woke by any means of the word. And who knows what his actual views on trans people were. But you know what? He didn't want to see anyone get hurt or anyone looked down upon. He wanted people to have a good time and to laugh. I used to believe that Dave Chappelle was in the top 5 best comedians of the world. I used to think there was no better storyteller than Dave Chappelle. But guess what? If you have to make a joke and then you have to explain yourself time and time and time and time and time and time and time again, maybe you're just not that good. Now look, to clarify, I'm not gonna sit here and tell Dave Chappelle what to joke about and what not to joke about because, well, why should he care about what I had to say? If Chappelle does have a very funny joke about a trans person, then he's more than welcome to say this. You can absolutely make funny jokes about the trans community. And for what it's worth, Dave Chappelle has talked several times about his friend Daphne Dorman, who was a trans comedian. She sadly took her life at the age of 44. Chappelle has actually talked about her in his Sticks and Stones special and his Closer special, and I do actually believe that Chappelle did genuinely care about her and was deeply affected by her death. However, all I'm saying is this. Chappelle, people are allowed to call you out sometimes. People are allowed to call you out for basically selling out by going to that Saudi Arabia comedy festival. It doesn't mean people are being racist against you. And quite frankly, when Chappelle reflects with that criticism by saying people are racist, he only comes off as more pathetic. And again, if he does say a joke that completely falls flat on its face, it doesn't mean that people are triggered or offended. It just means that it wasn't funny. And sometimes a certain crowd will not like that joke. In my first ever video, I remember even saying Norm Macdonald was a man who dared to bomb. Norm didn't give a shit when he bombed, and he didn't complain about it either. That's all I'm saying.
Whatever happened to Gary Cooper? The strong, silent type.
I saw a wonderful play. A guy went on a trapeze over the audience. This was at the height of the AIDS epidemic. And he cut himself, and his blood, his AIDS, yeah. His AIDS-filled blood went all over the audience. We never cheered because we were afraid to be politically incorrect, so instead we contract AIDS.
Nobody's got AIDS.
Norm's comedy is so good that in many ways it's completely ruined Dave Chappelle for me. And as far as I'm considered, it's made me truly realize how comedy is in a bad, and I mean a bad situation here. Joe Rogan has essentially killed it. Why is this? Because comedians nowadays feel like they're celebrities rather than comedians. The same comedians who will talk about how people shouldn't be offended and how they should be able to take jokes. Meanwhile, anytime any of them go onto Joe Rogan's podcast, whether that be Tom Segura or Bert Kreischer, Joe Rogan has to constantly tell them not to read the negative comments on their videos. But I thought you were edgy, though. I thought you were able to take jokes. Apparently as well, according to Bert Kreischer, you shouldn't be making fun of comedians or impersonating them because you're just putting them down and you're just undermining what they do for a living.
So you whittle down the thing they do and you go like, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that.
and then none of the nuance is there. It's like you can do it
minimize
to
it.
every comic, and I'll tell you, they did it to Sebastian a couple times on Skanks. And I understood it. I get it, but it's like Sebastian's a little more than what's up with these people,
bro. You're a fat, shirtless guy who's an alcoholic. Grow up, please. You're nothing special. But then again, though, as we all know, Bert Kreischer famously said that there's a difference between a pedestrian's brain and a comedian's brain. Coming from someone whose brain looks just as good as his liver.
That once when you were laughing at some guy doing a terrible impression of me, and it's a very
Kyle Kalinske. He does a great impression of you.
I didn't know who he was.
What's that? Did I say Kalinske? Sorry, Kyle.
No,
Kyle
we
Dunnigan.
don't have to look at this. I'm leaving.
It's amazing.
To you, it was amazing. It wasn't. I don't manage.
Oh, guys, no. Please don't do an impression of our precious Bill Maher. He may tell you what his thoughts on religion are. I do like comedians like Jimmy Carr, but even when Carr is talking about how him going to Saudi Arabia to make people laugh is apparently supposed to be a good thing because apparently it's going to inspire change in these people, I think is so wrong, and it's such a cop-out answer. Guys, I got some really bad news for you. But, you aren't going to change how Saudi Arabia works. You're not going to change the government, and you're definitely not going to change the fact that the human rights over there are complete and utter garbage. You wanna know why this is? Because you aren't philosophers. You're comedians who have proven already that you are willing to sell your soul to the devil at the highest bidder. It's funny as well, because you could tell that Norm Macdonald thought that Joe Rogan and his supposed Death Squad were a bunch of fucking jokes. Just look at the way Norm talks about them. On Norm Macdonald Live, he had Bobby Lee on as a guest, and Bobby Lee explained that he almost got cancelled, quote-unquote, from comedy. This is because he was a support act once for Carlos Mencia. This is around the time when Joe Rogan had called out Carlos Mencia for stealing jokes. Now, Rogan was completely in the right to do this. However, Mencia was seen as being friends with Bobby Lee, and Bobby Lee's career was nearly ruined by the so-called Death Squad, which is the name of a group of comedians that were associated with Joe Rogan.
Squad?
Okay. But I have had problems with them. Yeah. They tried to derail me years ago. Well, because I was in cahoots with Mencia, they thought.
Okay.
Oh, right. So when the whole Carlos Mencia, Joe Rogan thing happened, they had me on tape. Right? Like, I didn't know that Joe Rogan was... I love Joe. He's a friend of mine. Yeah. Joe, if you're listening, we're good, right? But the thing is that I didn't know that he was taping me. So I said, yeah, Mencia steals. What did I get? Of millions. Oh, but then over the years, though, I made my way back into the group, and now we're all good.
So you opened for Mencia, which made you the enemy of the Death Squad.
Yeah. Because, you know,
it's like a Bruce Lee movie.
Yeah, it's just like it.
So the Death Squad.
I don't know what Bruce Lee movie.
They're comedians? Yeah. Well, don't you think Death Squad makes more sense in a Bruce Lee movie than a comedy club?
That is true.
I went to a comedy club, and then the next week, the Death Squad were there. It's just odd. I don't know.
Now, I really don't want to get political here, but it's very, very worrying that Joe Rogan seems to be involved with politics in the sense that he's now been invited to the White House, and a lot of people would speculate that he's one of the big reasons why Donald Trump is currently the President of the United States. The reason it's worrying is because Joe Rogan is so stupid. There's a fantastic channel called Too Lazy to Try, and he talks about how Norm Macdonald had clearly trolled Joe Rogan into thinking that he stopped smoking cigarettes and relapsed, when in reality, this was just another bit by Norm.
Friends have even talked about it quite a bit, but a great example of this that people don't really mention too much is the time Norm Macdonald trolled him And he did it so well. Still to this day, Joe doesn't realize it was just a bit and Norm was trying to mess with him. And Joe tells this story all the time. I mean, he loves telling it because he loves Norm. Guest to get on your show. And also, I don't think Norm was the biggest fan of Joe's. You know, I don't think he disliked him or anything, but it's clear he didn't really think he was the best comedian. And Joe still tells this story like, oh no, he's being 100% serious. Like, apparently Joe had a conversation with Norm on a plane that either was Norm doing a bit or it caused Norm to relapse on cigarettes. So apparently Rogan, he was randomly seated next to Norm 2 different times on flights. And the second time, Norm spent most of the flight talking to Rogan about how he quit cigarettes. But then when they landed, right away, Norm bought a pack and started smoking them. And it was like, man, all that talk about cigarettes made me want to smoke, which definitely sounds like Norm's sense of humor. And Rogan's obviously the perfect person to do this bit on because he's going to completely believe it, even though some comedians have kind of tried to explain it to him. But you can tell they also don't really want to burst Joe's bubble because he loves this story. He loves telling it. I mean, he's probably told it over 20 times on his podcast, and still whenever he brings it up, he acts like it's the first time anybody's heard it.
Joe Rogan, to this day, still thinks that Norm had quit smoking when he was just pulling his leg. This is supposed to be the face of comedy, by the way, okay? This is the guy that's supposed to define what's funny and what isn't funny, and even he can understand Norm's humor. And as Too Lazy to Try summarizes it, other comedians are just too afraid to correct Norm on this. I mean, Christ almighty. Another video I saw recently from Too Lazy to Try was about how Alex Jones was taking shots at Joe Rogan being too afraid to go to the White House because of the conflict with Iran versus the USA. Look at how scared these other people are on this podcast that, oh no, don't criticize almighty Joe Rogan. It's embarrassing and it's cringy, okay? I would love to make more videos about how much I despise these goofs and these nerds. These guys have killed comedy so badly. Fuck them. Wait, what was I talking about again? Oh yeah, Dirty Work is like a subversive masterpiece or something?
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
I think it's very appropriate if we end this video by talking about one of Norm Macdonald's good friends and one of his biggest influences in the comedy business, Sam Kinison.
Didn't work for me. You ever been married? What's your name? Gary. Well, Gary, if you ever think about getting married, if you ever think you've met the right girl, you want to settle down, get a house, get a car, will you do me a favor, Gary? Remember this face. Because if you get married, Gary, that'll be your face every day.
Kinison was known for his distinct scream and his loud rants and his crazy, over-the-top, politically incorrect persona. And he was also known for being a massive drug addict. Later on, his career was stagnating because of said addiction, and Sam Kinison had kicked said addiction and was clean and sober. On the 10th of April 1992, Sam Kinison was driving along the Needles Highway northwest of California. A juvenile who had been driving under the influence crossed into Kinison's lane and crashed into his vehicle. Witness testimony said that Kinison had got out of his vehicle and sat down on the side of the road. Kinison's last words were reportedly, "Why now?" He then said, "But why?" And then he eventually said, "Okay, okay, okay." Kinison passed away of internal bleeding. Kinison's wife was also in the vehicle and she suffered a concussion, and Kinison was only 38 years old.
It was so great because he emulated an evangelist, because the evangelists are best speakers in the world because they get money for nothing. People give them money for nothing. He'd do big tumblers, you know, where anybody else would have that much vodka, he'd have a big tumbler. He just had way more than you of everything. He was clean and sober when he died. Turned out you could die from other stuff. That was the bad news.
The video I'm showing on screen, by the way, is a fantastic short film about Norm Macdonald, directed by Aaron Fromm. I'll put the link in the description. It's only 6 minutes long, and you should definitely give it a listen to. Norm Macdonald has talked a lot about Sam Kinison. He even references him in his autobiography. It is very clear to me that Sam's death had a huge impact on Norm Macdonald, and I would even go as far to say that he completely changed Norm's outlook on life. Obviously, Sam Kinison had basically taught Norm how to tell a joke, which again, Norm has described before. But the way Sam died in real life, it clearly had a lasting impact on Norm. I can't help but feel, when Norm initially got that cancer diagnosis, or maybe when he found out that there was simply nothing that the doctors could do to help him, is that the first thing that came to his mind? There are other ways of dying? And that, sadly, is why sometimes life is completely unfair. Sam Kinison wasn't the driver under the influence. He was killed by the driver under the influence. Norm Macdonald did love to smoke, but other than that, he was a pretty healthy person. But Norm was clean and sober, and still, he died at 61, and nobody should be dying at the age of 61. It's okay though, we can still blame Adam Eget for that.
You know, when you think about it, Sam Kinison had only, 3 minutes to come to terms with the fact that he was going to die? A lot of people would have been in complete denial. A lot of people would have not accepted that. A lot of people would have fought it. But Sam, somehow, within those 3 minutes, was able to come to that realization, and he ended up dying in peace. As sad as it is to think about Norm, I think we can take comfort in knowing that in many ways he was a very lucky man. He had a decade to come to terms with the fact that maybe he just wasn't going to be around for long. He was lucky enough to write a book. He was lucky enough to be the final act on the David Letterman show. And he was lucky enough for Dirty Work to have a re-evaluation. And Norm was lucky enough to have made us laugh, and for him to realize that he did have a loving fan base that did really care about him. Norm was absolutely scared, but he didn't want us being scared. And I think we can take comfort in that as well. Norm didn't tell us that he was dying because, well, why the should we have known that? It's really none of our business. But the main reason why Norm did that is because he just didn't want his fan base to worry about him. He wanted his fans to laugh until his last breath. And it worked. Thank you, Norm. We miss you.
If the cancer dies, I mean, if you die, the cancer also dies at exactly the same time. So that, to me, is not a loss, that's a draw. That's a, you know what I mean? It's not like the cancer's gonna jump up and go, Uncle Bert's wife. Where is he? I won fair and square. This is where he works? Hi, name's Cancer. How are you? Where do I? You just throw me to my cubicle. Bowell. First name is Bowell.